Welcome back to Drawing Me Out with Bill Willingham. I'm Bill Willingham, which is damn convenient considering the title. And also with Brad Tomte. Say hello, Brad Tomte.
Hello, Brad Tomte. That was just to satisfy because I got scolded for not telling the joke last time. So.
Okay, yeah. Did I scold?
You did. You scolded.
Okay, all right. Well, you had it coming.
Okay.
This time, we are going to be taking questions. We've done a few of these videos now. Questions have mounted up. Let's deal a few of them. Before we get into the questions, please consider subscribing. Hit that angry red button down below. Or like, or what else?
Share, subscribe, commit. All the different things that the YouTube gods want you to do for us.
All right. I'll get that right someday. So, Brad, what's our first question?
So most of the questions have been coming in across our Twitter and directly to Bill and I on all our social media. Remember, we do have our own Twitter account. It's down in the links below. And you can also leave your questions here on the videos. So some of these questions that came in, the first one we got, what character have you never gotten to draw for publication? Something you wanted to actually work on that book and have never gotten to.
All right. I'm going to reveal an insider secret here. I looked over the questions that are coming up so that I could make a few decisions. There's quite a few characters that I've never gotten to draw professionally. A few that I've never gotten to write professionally. If I could restart my comics career and make no mistakes and piss no editors off in my early days, I would have been drawing Thor for Marvel for many years. So why don't we make that our sketch today? I'm gonna try a Thor. Always liked the character. Now, back when I wanted to both write and draw Thor, he was going through a bit of a humdrum era. Hadn't been really Jack Kirby great in a long time. So I was enthused to come in and do my version of Thor and try and make him mythological and spectacular again. And a lot of folks had taken a whack at the character. And the thing I wanted to do most was heavy lean into the Norse mythology. I had a pretty good scolding of Dan Jurgens, who did a terrific run on Thor for a while. But at one point, he had young Thor and young Loki kind of hanging out in Asgard, getting into trouble and being in places they shouldn't be. There was a mention from Thor that if we get caught, Dad will send us to Hela's realm for punishment, Hela being the goddess of death. But now, as everyone who knows the mythology knows, Hela was one of Loki's monstrous children. So if Loki's just a little kid still then, chances are Hela wasn't born yet. I wanted to do more affection and loyalty to the original Norse mythology. I think the thing that made Marvel characters great, and the DC characters too, the best of the best, were that they were superheroes secondary to something else. Thor was the god of thunder of Norse mythology, and by circumstances, he also happened to be a superhero in the Marvel universe. But first and foremost, he was the god of thunder in this wonderful mythology. So that's what I wanted to do. Now, since then, Thor, as I said with Dan Jurgens' run, and I don't want to indict anyone, but there's been some really terrific runs on Thor since then, where they did really explore the mythology in greater detail. So part of I want to do Thor because it's never really been done before, is waned. Plus, I got a chance to write Thor once in a 4-issue miniseries that coincided. Marvel Comics wanted several Thor projects to come out coinciding with the movie.
With the first one, or?
Yeah, the first movie. They gave me my agent negotiated a pretty good deal where I could have my pick of several projects they were doing in anticipation of it. And they gave me my choice of them. And I picked the Warriors 3. I'm not sure why I picked the Warriors 3, but that was one of them available. Probably because I immediately came up with an interesting story, or interesting to me, for those characters. But I briefly got to write Thor in that story. So I guess I've done it. And so this whole sketch is a cheat, because this was supposed to be some character I never got to do, but I got to write him. But not in any detail, and mostly just to get the action going with our Warriors 3, getting them off into having their adventures. But I've always liked the character. And I'm not sure. I know they've done a lot with him lately. I live far away from my comic shop now, or the nearest comic shop, so I'm not sure what he's done lately. I think he's a woman now, or is that still? They change things so rapidly, maybe. But in any case, Thor would have been the one I wanted to do. Awesome. What other questions do we have, Brad?
Okay. Well, we're gonna kind of go sideways from format for just a minute, because someone pretty much said it's time for you to put up or shut up in one of the previous videos.
People say that to me surprisingly a lot.
That you've been drawing all along. So they want to see some of these, and they used air quotes just like we did in the first one in their writing, and said some of these air quote things you drew, air quote. So we'll go ahead and jump to on the drawing board at this point, now that we got Thor underway.
Sure. Okay. Put up or shut up. That's very good. I confess that you can probably see over to one side. I hit my my art drawers to be able to answer this question. And the real answer is a lot of stuff, but let's just take some of them. I'm going to show you my favorite unpublished story in comics. In 1994, probably maybe even late 93, there used to be a Justice League series that was done by Kevin Maguire and J.M. DeMatteis and Keith Giffen and others. And then it became popular enough they did a JLQ, which is Justice League Quarterly, where there's other stories about the characters within Justice League. And I did one of those, and I'm going to apologize to the writer of this story because I don't remember who you are. I think it was either Len Wein or perhaps Paul Kupperberg. Not that I get those guys confused, but they were DC stalwarts at the time. Len Wein has since left us, and Paul is off doing other things. But maybe one of those, and maybe not. So I do apologize for forgetting the writer. And you're about to find out why I forget the writer. So there was a story of the Martian Manhunter. Now, I'd done a few Martian Manhunter Justice League annuals at the time, and I really loved the character. So of course I said, yes, I'll take that. I think Andy Helfer was still the editor at the time. Maybe Kevin Dooley had taken over by then. But anyway, it takes place in 1956, the year I was born. And the Martian Manhunter had been on Earth, all this time. So it starts off in a 50s cheap hotel room where Martian Manhunter is sitting in bed, eating cookies, drinking, who knows, chocolate milk, whatever, and watching the news. Or he's watching TV. And because he's a shapeshifter, whatever comes on, he's like copying it. That's why we start with Martian Manhunter up here. Then he turns into Lucy from I Love Lucy. And then he's Desi Arnaz from I Love Lucy. And then suddenly there's a break-in of the programming with the news and Walter Cronkite. I got to tell you, when I drew this, I had no access to the internet. I wasn't a computer guy then. I think maybe the internet was still in its infancy then. So getting reference for Lucy and Ricky Ricardo, that was fairly easy. Getting reference for the way Walter Cronkite looked in 1956. Oh my goodness, that was hard. And then a young Richard Nixon. What they announce is that Richard Nixon is on saying that President Eisenhower, who was president then, just got kidnapped, or he was in the hospital for a heart condition. And this actually happened. And terrorists took over his hospital. So I guess he's not kidnapped. He's being held hostage. Yeah. All right. So Vice President then at the time, Richard Nixon, is making an announcement. And so, of course, in the last panel, he's turning into Richard Nixon. And I had to get a lot of library reference for a young Richard Nixon. And that was also difficult. The title was Nixon Attacks. And it's during the time when Richard Nixon is the vice president. So, only pencils, and I'll explain why. So we see Martian Manhunter, Nixon, get up out of bed, but he turns into Martian Manhunter. I got to draw a great big heroic Martian Manhunter just once because he doesn't really show up as Martian Manhunter much in this story. And in the cheap hotel room, there's a picture of hunting stuff and a duck and everything like that. And if you want to know why I drew that, it's because of the Jethro Tull song, One White Duck on a Wall. It's very important to me. It should be important to you too. So Martian Manhunter turns invisible, flies off to save the day, to save President Eisenhower. He had been captured by anti-fluoride terrorists. There really were don't put fluoride in our water terrorists back then. They never actually took Eisenhower, but that's just a little bit of information. So they had President Eisenhower, all his guards are dead, but Martian Manhunter invisibly bursts into the wall, starts to knock him silly. He's taking him out right and left, and he's about to win the day, but then two of the terrorists say, okay, whoever you are, invisible guy, we're going to shoot the president if you don't leave immediately. So Martian Manhunter has to leave. He flies invisibly past the staging area where all sorts of Secret Service and FBI guys and stuff are getting ready to try and figure out what to do. The main FBI guy here, I base him on a young Michael Douglas in the movie Falling Down. Why? I don't know. But Martian Manhunter is trying to figure out, okay, I can't do it the way I tried. Are they going to kill him? What can I do? And he sees that Nixon is on TV, and he goes, I know what I'll do. He ducks into a bathroom, changes to Nixon, comes out, and says, I'm Vice President Richard Nixon. Just leave it to me, boys. I'll go negotiate with him. And he pushes back past the guards because he's now de facto president since the actual president is unable to perform his duties. So they have to let him go. And he walks off. He's flashing the dual, peace signs that he was popular for, and barges past the terrorists and said, I'm going to talk to your boss about figuring this out and figuring out how we get out of this situation. And as a very heroic Richard Nixon, he goes in and deals with the head terrorists. This is probably the best story I've ever drawn in the sense that it came out like what I wanted. I drew all the backgrounds. I drew Richard Nixon in action in a cool 1950s suit, and I love 1950s, 1940s fashion. I think it was at its height. But Nixon takes him by surprise, and in the midst of negotiations, starts throwing the bad guys around. They shoot him, but bullets just bounce off. He grabs the guns out of their hands. He smashes heads into the walls. But then the guy says, okay, look, if you don't stop, I'm going to kill the president. But then Martian Manhunter turns from Nixon into the president and goes, oh, really? Which one is actually me? And apparently that works. And in my favorite panel of perhaps my favorite story, Nixon just knocks the bad guy across the room. I mean, look at that. Has Nixon ever looked better? And it was just a nice time. Everything was coming out the way I kind of envisioned it. And I wasn't all that great at drawing street clothes before this, but it just worked for me. Everything worked fine. So Nixon saves the day and rescues Eisenhower. It was actually Martian Manhunter. Because of this, apparently Eisenhower, who never thought much of his vice president choice, says, you know, you're much more heroic than I gave you credit for. You should consider running for president someday. And he does. And then we flash forward to when Nixon is resigning in disgrace and Martian Manhunter's in a bar and some guy saying, how did that guy ever get to be president? And there's a kind of a moment. It's like, well, it was actually my fault because he made Nixon heroic. Now, so it's kind of an anti-Nixon screed. I've got problems with Nixon. He's not as, by today's standards, he didn't, break as many do's and don'ts of presidency as one might think. Anyway, why was this never inked or lettered or printed? Because just after I handed this in, President Nixon died. This was in 1995, something like that.
That's
wait, I have it written down here. Anyway, 94.
94, yeah.
Okay. So President Nixon died, and they thought it would be bad taste to run this story since it is very critical of Nixon. No one ever got too poo-pooed in life by being critical of Nixon. But they thought it would be in bad taste. And so they sent the art back to me, uninked, unlettered, and said, we won't be publishing this. They paid me. Never got to see it. And except for this little thing, I guess you never will get to see it. So that's an example of some of the stuff I did. You want to see something cool?
Oh, I remember that one. That one's a gorgeous
All right.
piece.
How much of this can you see? I'm going to
Slide it down towards you.
I'm going to slide it down. This is a piece I did that is going to Hero Initiative to hopefully raise money. It's a single illustration piece called Superman versus Thor. And you can see here, we got Superman trying to hold up a collapsing bunch of rubble and stuff. And you see just this indication, what caused the collapsing rubble, which is Thor's hammer. So, Superman versus Thor. I based my Superman on the Superman serial back in 48 and 50 that Kirk Allen played Superman. Has always been one of my favorite. So, real clothes and all that. And he's strong, but not move planets through space strong. But yeah, Kirk Allen Superman versus Thor. And because I had an odd-shaped piece of illustration board, I just made it a very elongated, all this rubble. And Superman's holding it up. Apparently he's saving a cat. And he's doing this because Thor got in a good whack. So this, I penciled it and inked it. And I'm still debating whether or not to try and paint it. I think it would be interesting as a full color thing. But if I did paint it, we may never see it because I'm so far behind on everything. I may just send this out to the Hero Initiative as a penciled and ink piece, a piece of original art for anyone who to bid. I'm not sure how I guess they run auctions. All right. What else have we got? I'm gonna give you guys, whoever you are, a good answer. All right. First of all, this isn't stuff I've drawn that you don't know about. Remember when I said there's only 2 pages I still have of elementals? Turns out in another stack of stuff that I was looking through while looking for this other stuff, I found 4 others, all from that issue 22 of the Elementals. So those 2 weren't my last 2. There's 4 more. Those will go up someday. They're all pages of the villain, Reverend Jeremy Skagg. None of the Elementals, so they either won't sell or won't sell for much. I've also been doing commissions. The last time I did San Diego show, I took a bunch of $500 a pop commissions, where you pick the character and I will do something. Here's an example, Snow White, that I really like how she turned out. Once again, something that turned out more or less the way I envisioned it. I think it says, let's see, Snow White knows the secret to a power business suit has always been the choice of swords. Okay, so Snow White's going off to do something Snow White-ish.
That looks like a copy. Is that you've already sent out the original?
Oh yeah, yeah. This is my copy.
Nice.
The fellow who commissioned it, of course, picked it up at the San Diego show. But we have Boy Blue and Buffkin knowing that, okay, she's mad, someone's in trouble. So I've been doing a bunch of those. I did a bunch of commissions. I'm not going to show you all of them. I've also been doing full figure sketches of characters I've drawn. This is my full figure commission sketch of Blue Devil, which I ended up doing a different one because this was not turning out the way I wanted it. It's like he was a little doughy. He had too many Oreos and sandwiches over the last couple of weeks, and I did a better one than that. And here's one in progress that I can't offer for sale until I finish it. When I say $500 per character, that's a lot. So I add, stuff. I add something to imply a story in the background. So I've got some of her teammates from Shadow Pact. That will be finished at one point. And then here's a Knight's Master in progress that I'll finish up and offer for sale at one point. Other things that I've done. Unbeknownst to anybody, I restarted Coventry once. I was going to okay, Coventry reached a stalling point, but then I was going to restart it fresh a few years down the line and try and get back on the Coventry bandwagon. And so these are the pages I completed of this. Before I lost steam. This was a double page spread. Do you have is it all in there?
Yeah.
Okay. I love doing these weird crowd scenes. Big dirty city, guys hanging out in front of ads for the zoo. So I'm going to skip through them pretty quickly. I got several pages in before I lost steam. Why did I lose steam? Good question. Maybe a question for another time. Those who remember Coventry knows that Claudia Nevermore, the sorceress, had an assistant, William, that worked for her, and this showed how they met. He was actually trying to pitch her on a TV series or something. I did single page illustrations. This was an illustration for the online prose collective called Clockwork Storybook. This was one of my middleman stories. I did lots of artwork for proposals. I want to tell you a secret about, I don't know if Marvel does this, but DC did it a lot, where they would commission proposal pitches from lots of people and either pick the best or pick none or whatever like that. And in this case, someone at the Vertigo office wanted pitches for new stories set in the Sandman fictional universe. And so in addition to whatever it is I proposed story-wise, and I forget that it was not accepted, I did a lot of artwork. This is Matthew the Raven. I forget her. She's the girl that sits in a cave. It was for a Corinthian miniseries. This is the Corinthian. He's got teeth where his eyes should go. Nuala, the elf girl. There was Daniel, the new Dream Master, as opposed to the old one, Pumpkinhead. So you do a lot of work, and then they will say, yeah, let's do this, or that's just not right. And it's right at about the time I did this that I decided, you know what? I'm going to stop drawing for free for these things, unless it's a story I want to tell, not something that they do. Anyway, Spellbinder was a character I wrote in, was it Weird Heroes or Strange Heroes for Lone Star Press. And this was one of the chapters that I was going to draw myself. And then I was taking so long that this chapter was actually published, but with a different artist. But it was the chapter right after he captured the baby Grendel and had him all tied up in monkey bars. And before they can figure out what to do with it, someone comes to visit that is going to endanger his secret identity. And so his impromptu date gets complex. Cornelius the cat, who has to jump off down the computer so that she doesn't realize that he's not a normal cat. I got this far into it, 4 pages, almost 4 pages, before it was clear I wasn't going to be finishing it. So that's some of the stuff I did. I do draw. I draw a lot. I don't finish a lot. Damn it. But yeah, I do. So, yeah, Mr. Put Up or Shut Up guy. There's a lot of stuff, unfortunately, like the Nixon Attacks, there's a lot of stuff that you're just not going to be able to see. I apologize for that. But then there's a lot of stuff out there that was put out to abysmal sales. And so you probably didn't see that simply because you didn't know about it or you didn't look for it or what have you. Yes, I do draw. What's next? I'm tired of making excuses for not drawing.
Okay, well, someone was asking, and they were wondering what comic conventions are you doing, either in the near or / far future. When can they go and get things scribbled on if they can, and that type of thing.
Good question. The answer is none. Unrelated to the coronavirus, Wuhan virus death plague going all around right now. I stopped doing conventions a while ago because, I'm an old fart and traveling has gotten to be difficult, annoying. So I stopped doing conventions when getting on airplanes and all of the hassle involved with that just became too annoying, which is too bad because I get invited to so many wonderful places now. I had a little heart thing many years back, and because of that, because of the bad timing of it, not that having a little heart thing ever comes with good timing. It's like, oh, I was hoping I would get this right at this perfect moment.
Right.
But I had to cancel a circumnavigate the world trip where I was going to do a convention in, I think, Poland, and then communist China. Mainland China. And then stops in New Zealand and Australia. So just start at one end of the world and go all around. And I had to cancel all of that because of it. And I've since been invited to, Iceland and Greenland, wonderful places where I'd always wanted to get to. The annoyance of traveling kind of overwhelms the joy of being in new and interesting places. So since then, I've only done appearances at places that I could easily drive to, and then rarely. Now, with the coronavirus, that, of course, has dropped down to 0 as well. So, sorry about that.
So no plans and not even foreseeable. Okay.
None. However, if you want interaction, there are 2 ways to do it. Just show up at my door, in which case you might get shot. Or watch these videos and, ask questions and give comments, do it that way.
Excellent. And then the last official question we had, which is kind of funny, you show those Strange Heroes pages from Lone Star Press. Someone asked, what supplies do you use when you're drawing? The very first sketch you did was on a piece of Lone Star Press Bristol board. Our buddy Bill Williams, those were his books. And so you had some of those pages. Where do those pages come from? Do the publishers send those to you? What are your pencil heads? Literally, what's your process?
Okay, good question. I can't answer it all of it in the time remaining, but let's deal with some of it. The boards that are printed up with a company logo are provided by that company. That seems pretty self-evident. Many companies, Marvel and DC and some of the smaller companies, First Comics used to do it back in their days, will provide the art boards to their artists and therefore ensure a kind of a standard of quality. With DC Comics, I would often get art boards for things like I had to do a single illustration of something and it'd still send me 30 art boards. So I would always have extra. And sometimes I would draw other companies' comics on like DC artboards until I believe it was Bob Wayne at DC came up to me at one point and says, so I noticed you use a lot of DC artboards for your comics for, well, whoever. I go, oops, yep, busted. But you know, if they send a bunch and it's good quality material, of course it's going to be used.
You just tell them you can't see blue lines, so you don't know whose logo's on there.
Oh, that was good. But no, I didn't think of that. But now it never comes up again. Otherwise, 2-ply Bristol in 11 by 17 format is a standard. That's what I'm doing now, working on now. You see that there's no company marks on it. 11 by 17 gives you the ability to do a 10 by 15 image size, which is, if anything, is standard for comic books, that is. That's how much bigger than normal a page is drawn. When I first started trying to do comics as a kid and figured out, I thought, of course, like every kid did, that they were drawn the same size that the comics were printed. So it took me a long time to figure out why I couldn't get the kind of quality and detail that the real artists got. 10 inches by 15 inches is a comic page. So if you put it on an 11 by 17 page paper, you are golden. And the nice thing is you don't have to send in your originals anymore, because one of the other industry standards is an 11 by 17 scanner. So you can scan these and send it in that way, and you hold on to the originals, which is something new in the industry, or fairly new for me, and a nice innovation. Pencils, use any pencil you like. What I use is, can you see that? In my very first convention, a little hole-in-the-wall Chicago convention, I met John Byrne for the first time, and he was using one of these, it's called a lead holder, and it's just a mechanical thing that holds lead in a little vice-like grip there at the beginning, at the tip.
And then you get your lead pointer. And
then you get your lead pointer, which is this thing, and you feed it in there. It puts it right next to a grinder, and you do this. And oh, look at that. What a lovely point you get.
And most of your pointers will have that little, there's a piece of cotton in the top of them, so you can actually wipe off the extra lead, the powder, so you don't get it all over your mess.
Yes, there's that piece of cotton where you stick it in there to wipe off the powder so you don't get a mess. I hate when these things get stained. Therefore, I don't ever use that. It's a weird thing. I remember once I was working with a friend in the studio, and he used my pencil pointer and just
Started
did that.
pounding. Yeah.
And then I said, Keith, his name was Keith Wilson. I said, Keith, great. I got to throw this one away. I'm that weirdly anal about odd stuff. But yes, that's what that's for. And these other holes are to check your depth of lead before you put it in there. But yeah, that's, you know, if you're going to draw comics, you want a good pencil, and the best pencil is the one you like. And then do it on good paper. 2-ply Bristol. It comes in either smooth or plate, I think is one of the words for the non-smooth. It's just got a little bit of tooth to it. I like my drawing paper with a little bit of tooth, which is a little bit of roughness to it. Some people prefer a nice smooth finish, which is called plate. But that is, you know, your preference. Yeah. I think the other set of equipment is inking stuff, which we can discuss someday when, instead of drawing something while we talk, I will ink something while we talk. But we'll save that for a later date.
All right. Well, then we'll save any other questions. Be sure and keep those coming in through the YouTube channel. And we'll save the other questions for the next time we do a Q&A episode. Any other final thoughts?
I have no final thoughts. Be good to each other in these days of privation. Spend lots of time online since you are sort of hiding or sheltering in place. And if you're going to do that, spend that time with us if you want. Send in your questions, your comments, and we will deal with them in the future. Thank you very much.
Awesome. All right. As always, we'll have Bill draw us out, and we'll see you guys next time.
Oh, did we run out of our time?